Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's been, 2 years since I started the podcast. And I figured I'd do this reaction video. Well, I chose Tyrone because I used to do his social media before he hit the big time and doing all of the great stuff that he's doing. Like we all start out, we all need somebody who's going to help us get our messages out. So I started out, before I got into the podcast, I used to do social media training. I was Hootsuite certified, and I would go out to California and I would go out and film and take pictures of my clients as they were appearing on the red carpet. And that's how I started working with Tyrone. Let's get this
Greetings
started.
and salutations, TT. You know that's my affectionate name for you. They don't know that, but they need to know that's what I call you. So it's really good. More importantly, it's great to be here for you. And before I begin, I do have to tell your viewers and your people there, I cannot thank you personally enough for what you've done to get me to where I am today. That means a lot. None of this would have happened without meeting you and what you've done to help me, along with Ernest Thomas, Patrick Fawcett, some of the other people that are, in television and radio. You've done a lot to help them there. And so I never want that to go unnoticed. And I want to make sure that your people know that as well. And we all thank you. Ernest said he wants to come on too, by the way.
Oh, I'll be glad to have Mr. Ernest come on there.
I always said I wanted to have Ernest Thomas as my guest, but one day I'll have him on there. Mark my words. We're going to get Ernest Thomas on here to do an interview with me.
So I really want to start. It's like when you're, for those who don't know, you're from Cincinnati. So that means you had to take a giant leap of faith to go from Cincinnati to LA.
It was fun doing his interview with Tyrone, because he was from Cincinnati. So it was kind of easy to talk to somebody who was from here and watching him grow from where he was here in Cincinnati to doing his stuff in California. So like I said, I thought it was really cool. I was so thankful that he agreed to doing the podcast with me, and it's really exciting. And I can't believe that this is what, 2 years in the making, how far we've come. So yeah, it's exciting to watch the growth.
Our greatest strides, or our confidence strides, is what you call yourself with the things which you do. Are you being able to be uncomfortable with making a move? I think that's one of the biggest problems that a lot of us have. We say we want to do something, but we're concerned about what other people say or what other people think, or whether it will work out, or what happens if it doesn't. And the truth of the matter is, it usually always works out. You're just going to have to be uncomfortable in doing it.
So when you hit those roadblocks of like resistance, do you have like some kind of regiment in place?
I think these are some of the same inquiry questions I've been asking everybody. I don't think I've ever changed any of my questions.
I cannot afford to have a plan B. Plan A will always work. And one of the reasons why is because it's the one thing that all of us just simply want to do. We want plan A to work. And plan A has to work because you don't want a plan B. If there's a plan B, guess what? Most of us usually go to a plan B. So in my mind, the one thing I learned is to take an assessment of where I am at the moment. And the second thing I usually do, even when I'm bent out of shape or when I feel myself in fear, I try to take the emotion out of the equation. In other words, just kind of think it through without having to concern myself with what's going to happen, with this sense of anxiety if it doesn't happen the way in which I want it to. So I've just learned, with all the resistance in which I've had, there just isn't a plan B for me. And I think that's what's really kind of helped me to push forward, even when I'm uncomfortable. And many people ask, am I uncomfortable on television or radio? And the truth is, I'm always uncomfortable. But what I'm more uncomfortable about is if I don't do it. That's what makes the difference.
So that's interesting. It's like, do you ever get used to being seen on television, or like how do you deal with that?
As a public figure, the one thing that I've had to learn, and I want to preface this by saying, I rarely give like video interviews or interviews at all on television about my personal self. So, and the reason why is because I'm usually uncomfortable talking about myself, because in my mind, I just believe that I'm just going to do it no matter what happens. I don't allow myself the opportunity to say no, or that what's going to happen. Oh my God, is this going to work? And I just really believe it's just going to have to work no matter what, because in my mind, and for everyone who does something, it's all we've got. So if it's all we've got, then you're going to make it work. And I think that's what's always got me, to where I am today. My struggle,
You gotta
I
make
think,
it
has
work.
been my strength.
Gotta
I think
make it
that's how I
work.
look at it.
Right. So I know you've been in the radio circuit for a lot. How was it transitioning into the television circuit? Like, how was that a whole new element that you had to get used to, or how did that?
Yeah, I'll never forget. I remember the first Unsung I did, and it was for Midnight Star. And it was the very first one. And I remember when I watched it on television, I thought about the fact that I was looking as though I was being interviewed, when in essence, they didn't need someone interviewed. They needed somebody to contribute to the show. And I remember after I watched it, I remember calling the producer back and I said, hey, thanks so much for giving me an opportunity to be here. But let me assure you, the next time you call me, I'm going to be ready. And one of the things I did was I studied what everyone else was doing. And then I realized what I really just needed to do was just be me. And, on television, it shows, because I'm just being me when I'm talking. And people respect and appreciate that. And people who know you know that it's not an act. So I've just learned not to be an act on television, unless I'm doing a film or a movie, that's different. But otherwise, when you're doing something that's informative, be informative, know your element. And I think that's what's gotten me to where I am today.
Right. Well, anyone who knows you knows you're authentic on the camera and off the camera, because you have a personality that's just amazing.
What says happiness better than me?
No, I'm gonna say, how did that come about? I mean, you some people might feel that a positive attitude is developed, or they have it. So I mean, I'm not diving into much of your personal history, but I mean, how do you manage to deal with the setbacks, I guess?
In my life, I think I've always tried to find what was positive, because things weren't always fantastic. They weren't always great. And like many people, we've struggled with the little things in life, and I've had to learn that, on my own. But simplicity has always been a big part of my life. The simple things mean a lot to me. Even just, in the mornings now, I'll just go for a walk for a long time, or, I keep things simple. I recognize that being a public figure doesn't mean that I always have to be the public figure all the time. That there's a time and a place for me to simply, be private. And, I'm like everybody else who has dreams or goals. It's not easy. And I mean, I'm speaking to you not only just as you interviewing me, as a friend, because, you've seen the struggles in which I've been through before I got here. And, it's for all the times in which people have asked me to interview, it's very few and far between. So I really felt like it was very important for me to do this, particularly with you, because there's nothing that we haven't spoken about. We've talked about everything, and you've allowed that. And so when you find someone who's able to just respect and appreciate who you are for what you've become, it just makes it a lot easier. So for me, my life hasn't always been easy. It's always been, for the most part, a struggle. And part of it is what we place upon ourselves, and recognize that we try to backtrack to try to make things right, only to discover that sometimes we can't.
Right. So I love it. Like I said, anybody, we've had a friendship for a period of time. So it's like, I remember sometimes when I was in a little funk mode, I'm like,
It's amazing how I know what questions I'm going to ask.
So how important is it to surround yourself with other people, like to a team, or do you have a team? Do you put together a team? How do you manage that?
Look, it's really essential. If you need to understand, you can't make the round hole fit in a square peg. So if you're dealing with people who are square pegs, you're not going to be able to fit into their circle. And what I've really learned, I think the biggest thing in which I've learned is that if you're not ready for people to talk about you, you're not ready for success. I think once you've learned to be okay with that and not concern yourself with over 300 million people in the United States, and for all of us, we've allowed 2 or 3 people to dictate how we live. And that's the one thing that I'll never do again. I think once I got by that, I started living. I remember that a long time ago, I was at someone's house and I said, "Oh, this living room, I love your living room." I said, "It looks really, enjoyable." And she said, "My living room is made to be lived in." And that I got it. I really caught that, because a lot of times we go somewhere in the living room, how we grew up, that was like a sacred place. We didn't do that. But what I do is along the way, when I meet people, I catch nuggets of things that really changed the course of my life. And as we're talking, it reminds me of something that when I worked at another company. And when I worked there, he asked me to move a set of equipment from one room to another. And I remember saying to him, "I don't think this will fit in that room." He said to me, "I know it's not going to fit in the room. That's why I'm asking you to figure out how to do it." But I use that as a tool for everything else in which I've done in my life. No, it wasn't going to fit in that room, but eventually I figured out a way to get it in there. So that means that in essence, it's almost the same way of life. You just going to have to figure out a way to make it work, because the truth of the matter is you always do. Now, it may not always fit the way you always wanted to. Some of us go around the corner to get across the street, and we have to kind of figure that out. And that's what I've learned.
I like that. So how did Timeless Tracks come about? How did that whole scene come about with your Timeless Tracks?
Timeless Tracks began with me. I would drive 144 miles every other weekend to Barstow, California, at a McDonald's where it had this train station and there was a radio station there. I got there to this place, and I remembered working really hard and telling this guy I really wanted to work there, and he had saw my resume and he said, "But you have no radio experience." And I remember going home with the person which I was seeing, explaining about the interview that I had with him, and she said, "Look, you're not going to get that job." And I remember how it made me feel. Like I went to my car and I started crying. I called this radio station up. I said, "Look, just thanks for the interview." And they said, "We'll give you the worst hours and the worst time." And so I would drive that 144 miles after getting off a full days of work and be on the air from midnight to 6 for 6 years. And in between the time that the music was going on, I wanted to do a show similar to what Casey Kasem did. And it was called Timeless Tracks, based on the top R&B songs of America, over the last 6 decades, according to the national, R&B singles charts. And I got a chance to meet Casey Kasem, and I told him that, what I was doing. And I asked him if I could send him a copy of it, and he said no, and he gave me some answer why I couldn't. And I said, "That's okay, Mr. Kasem, I'm going to be like you." I said, "You're the reason I got into to radio." He said, "I'll see you at the top, son." So this guy came and gave me a card and told me to send it to him. He'll listen. And I sent him the show, and Mr. Kasem called me, and he said, "Tyrone, this is Casey Kasem. Did I tell you not to send me that show?" And I said, "Mr. Kasem, look, I'm really sorry. You were my idol. I used to listen to you as a kid, and I didn't mean any harm. I'm sorry. I won't bother you." And the next words out of his mouth was, "Now I got to show you how to do it right." He said, "Come to my house." And that's how Timeless Tracks began.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So how did you transition into Unsung? How did that come about?
Well, the one thing I always tell people is that you have to be ready for any opportunity that comes to you. And one of the producers of Unsung was a dear friend of mine. His name was Michael Ajakwe, who passed away about a year or so ago. And I remember he was there, and I met him in a interview that I was doing, and he was a producer for Unsung. And I had, shortly after my cancer surgery, he wanted me to host his show that he had done for Ray Parker Jr. But after my cancer, my face looked very gaunt. It didn't look like I looked really sickly. And so I remember that, months later, someone who was supposed to do it couldn't show up. And then I hosted it for him. I sat next to this guy who was asking me questions. And he was asking me about who was the first. And I was just having a conversation with this guy. And I gave him a card. And 2 weeks later, I found out he was the executive producer of Unsung. Didn't know who I was talking to. And he asked me to come on. And that's how it began for me. And my life changed forever, really. It changed forever.
Wow. That's, like I said, your story is an amazing how you took the faith, the leap of faith to go out there and doing what you're doing. So let me hear about this book that you have. I heard you're an author now. So what's going on there?
Yes, I have a book. I do indeed. One of the books of which I did to get my story out was called Get Out of Your Own Way. And the book is based upon stories of people who had faced a sense of adversities and found themselves into the midst of the things in which they wanted to do. They made their dreams come true, and then they talked about how they did it. And as a matter of fact, your name is in my book because I made sure I put that in there. You are a big component of me getting to where I am today. And it was a very important aspect of, it gave me a sense of freedom because it allowed me to, finally kind of release some of the things in which I was feeling. And the truth of the matter is, even for myself, there were days I just felt like I was a loser, like I really just wasn't making it happen. And, this book showed, and it gave me a sense of release and showed the sense of perseverance about the things in which I needed to do in order to make my dreams come true. And for all of us, I'm not the only one, all of us to some degree feel the same way. The answer to some degree is always going to need to be yes for the things that you do, because you'll make it work. And I learned that from working for a very important celebrity who I worked for years. And she used to always say, I don't care who calls, the answer is yes, I'll figure it out. And that's been the same life in which I've lived, for myself.
Right. So I had a question. I was listening to your story, but I was like, I have a question. Hold on, give me a minute. I was so caught up in your story. I had a moment. Be focused. Stay focused.
Stay focused. Stay focused. But
I'm trying to stay focused, and sometimes I didn't write it down because, like I said, my whole thing is to stay present. It's like, how do you stay present when somebody's talking? And that's like one of the key things is giving yourself, listening to it and being present is a gift. So it's like I know that there's so much stuff that I'd love to know about how you do things and stuff like that. So it slipped my mind. That's really what I'm saying.
But the one thing I will tell you how I do stay present, what's always helped me is recognizing that each person is important, and I might be able to get something that's going to help me. And I've learned that with whatever it is in which we do, that you can't be better. You have to be different. Nobody ever hires you or says yes to you because you're better. Someone always says yes to you because you're different. There's something different about you because they meet 500 other people who are the same. So if they meet 500 different people, what makes you different from the other 499? And if you tell people what usually makes you different, usually you'll get what you want, because people don't want what's better. They want what's different. That comes with better becomes with expectations. Different comes with you being able to be yourself.
I love that. So we're down to 3 minutes, and I would love to say, how do we find out where you are? Where can we find your work and stuff?
Well, you can always go to my website, which is rnbhistorian.com. I can be also, reached on my Facebook and social medias on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram as well. Currently, I'm working on the book called The 4 Seasons of R&B, from the 60s to the 90s, 4 different decades, and the music that was a big part of our lives then, and the importance of what it was, and the top 10 acts of each particular decade. And I also talk about the charts and the things of that nature. For example, in the 60s, we used records. In the 70s, we used 8 tracks. In the 80s, we used cassettes. In the 90s, we used CDs. And, there were different things that we used. And so I'm talking about the artists then. It made a big difference in my life. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here.
Right. So I know you have the book that you're doing and stuff like that. So if anybody was interested in you do speeches, you go around, do you tour, okay.
Yeah, they can reach me at on my website, rnbhistorian.com, or tyronedubose.com will get them to the same place. It will get them to my website, which has all the information on it. But the most important thing that I always tell people is, your struggle is always your strength. Many people look at struggle as somehow or another there's something wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being able to struggle. The biggest thing for each and every one of us is being able to struggle and know the way out. No one's ever wants to hear the story of a person who has everything. People want to hear the story of a person who's had struggles and made it through. Those are the ones that people really and truly want to look at. And in this day and age, and particularly in the times in which we're in right now, it's a very important thing to do. So make yourself visible and being able to do everything that you've always wanted to do. This is the time to do it. And even now, while we're self-quarantined here in Los Angeles, the one thing in which I've learned for me right now is I've got a book that I've got to finish, that 4 Seasons of R&B. So when I get out in the summer, I'm going to be ready to go. And I think that's very important.
Right. So how is everything out there in California? You staying safe?
Yeah, I am indeed. It's kind of weird though. I mean, it's a sense of a hush that everybody kind of knows. I think it's just a new normal that we're all getting to. But the truth of the matter is, like they say, hashtag tag alone together. And the key is us
Hashtag alone
being able
together. I
to just,
forgot about
to
that.
get through this. Stay safe and recognize that this is not a joke. I've already lost a couple of friends from the virus already. So for me, I realize that it's definitely something that's very real. And so I want for everyone to please, stay alert, stay aware, stay informed, but more importantly, please, by all means, just stay safe.
All right. Well, Mr. Tyrone, thank you for your time. We are up on the on my time here, and I want to close out. I will definitely make sure I have all the links to find you in the descriptions and stuff like that. And like I said, thank you for your time to come on here.
I even had a
And
timer.
with that, I want to say, have a great day.
I was on it.
I will.
I was on it.
Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Wait, I got my eye on you.
Well, I cannot believe that was a time capsule. Oh my goodness. There was some good stuff. It's still some good stuff, even though it's been 2 years. So again, thanks for checking in on this video. Again, I'm Tanya, your host of Coffee with Tea. Thank you for checking us out. Again, you can check out our new interview, YouTube exclusive interview on Coffee with Tea here on YouTube. And also on the podcast, Coffee with Tea on Confidence Drive. So please check that out. And again, as we close out and everything we do, take things in stride, go with the flow, and create your own path. And we'll see you back here on another episode of Confidence Strides. Talk to you later. Bye.